Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
A good day, St. Lucia. Welcome to the program, Agriculture on the Move. My name is Philip Sidney, your host. If you are not aware, there are many programs and projects that are being implemented in the Ministry of Agriculture, and that is why we say this year is a production year for the Ministry of Agriculture. I'm sure those of you are aware that we have received or are distributing about 3 weeks ago 35,000 bags of fertilizer, NPK, to banana farmers, plantain farmers, and other crops farmers are producing. We also have the cocoa project, where that started last year, and there are so many programs that are going on under agriculture, which you will hear in this medium throughout the year. We also have, in the fisheries sector, you have the deployment of FAD around the island in our waters. We also have the rehabilitation of fishing ports, also the moorings and toilets, and the list goes on. We began in Dennery. Lots of work has been done in Dennery. All of this is in keeping with our food and nutrition security strategy, which is headed by our Honorable Alfred Prosper, the Minister with responsibility for agriculture here in St. Lucia. Forestry is doing its own share, and with me today is Mr. Alwyn Dornelly, who is our Chief Forest Officer, and I'd like to welcome him to the program. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Sydney, and good afternoon to our listeners, as well too.
Definitely. Alwyn, a lot is happening. I know you have a lot of programs. I don't think all St. Lucia is aware of what's happening. I know you have a program called desertification. You also have the land degradation fertility program. So for the knowledge of St. Lucia, tell us, what is desertification?
Okay, desertification is simply a condition in which the land becomes, and to put it in simple terms, the land is barren. So there are no trees, there are no plants, and the fertility, of that land is no longer, and it's in a state that trees won't grow, nothing will grow, on that land. And in the true sense of the word, desert, becoming a desert. So desertification, really and truly, and it's a process, that happens where the land at one time was, productive, fertile, but the resources, they have been eroded and destroyed to the extent that land no longer, can support, life.
Are we at that stage here in St. Lucia, or what is done to, avoid this?
Well, let me just go back a little bit, just to give a little, background. And no, St. Lucia is not in that state, and we would not want to get there. But in 1997, St. Lucia signed on to that international agreement, what we call the UNCCD. Now, UNCCD means United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. So that convention came into being in 1994, and there were two other conventions: CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and UNFCCC, that's the Climate Change Convention. So these three conventions came into being. That was in Rio Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. That's around 1994. So these 3 conventions are referred to as the Rio Conventions, and they all 3 have requirements or articles, that hinge, on each other, that are interlinked. Now, in 1997, St. Lucia signed on to the UNCCD, and the UNCCD is predominantly focused on land resources, managing land resources, trying to prevent, land from becoming deserts or degraded. Well, degraded first of all, and the worst case scenario is becoming desert. So the provisions of the UNCCD also is linked to what we will call the Sustainable Development Goals. In short, they call them SDGs, which came sometime afterwards. But one of the SDGs has to do with life on land and managing, the resources of the land in a way that would sustain ecosystems, that would sustain, the biodiversity, both the plants and the animals and all the organisms that exist, or survive within the ecosystem, and also to avoid situations, where those resources are being depleted and the land becoming, degraded, barren. So you have activities like deforestation, that could be a major cause for land, becoming degraded. And a lot of, the practices, our human practices, and most of which we would engage in, to support, our livelihoods. So you would have deforestation or loss of forest being, taking place, for development, for agriculture. But you also do have the loss of forests that could be linked, to climate change events. Some of these are the more indirect, forms of or ways in which, the forest, could be lost and eventually can lead to land degradation.
So as you mentioned land degradation, tell us exactly, is there a program or is this part and parcel of the whole umbrella?
So around 2016, thereabout, the UNCCD, embarked on a program that would seek to avoid, land degradation or desertification, and it looked towards let me see what's the best term to use in that sense, kind of neutralize the conditions that would lead to degradation. So that program was instituted, and again it's linked to that SDG which I told you about, life on land. That program is called the Land Degradation Neutrality program. So what it does is countries are given support to take certain actions that would first of all help them to identify potential areas that's maybe already degrading, or there are signs that those areas can go into degradation. So in 2018, St. Lucia, St. Lucia took on, that initiative, which was started by 2016, in which the other countries, over 100 countries, were given support and financial support, in most of the cases, to develop or to identify targets. So these targets are actually physical places, within, that whole land degradation neutrality program. So we had to identify those targets, physical places, like places in St. Lucia where that the forest, has perhaps been depleted or is lost. There are some areas that used to have, forests in the past, and no longer are we seeing, forests in those areas. Now, we're not saying that these areas have become desert, no. But if we don't do anything, or if we continue certain, negative practices, then we can see. So there was this first phase of that land degradation neutrality, which we went into in terms of setting those targets, and last year, the UNCCD further upskilled that program into a phase 2. So what essentially they were saying that, okay, now that you have set your targets, and you have identified those areas, that now we need to see that at least you are doing something more to be able to move that program forward. So last year they were on a second phase, so they call it the land degradation neutrality target setting program, LDNTSP 2. There was a call for proposals and expressions of interest from the UNCCD to the country parties to apply, to be part of that second phase of the program, which is meant to upscale, the first phase. And St. Lucia sent in a proposal, and out of that effort, only 18 countries, around the world were selected. And St. Lucia was the only Caribbean country that was selected on that second phase, of the program. So they did some capacity building as well too. So there was this meeting in Doha towards the third week in February. That was last month, in which the focal points, which would have been myself, and also a consultant, was hired by the UNCCD Secretariat in itself to support moving that second phase of the program, together. So both the consultant and myself attended, that meeting in Doha, Qatar, so that on our return here now, we can essentially just run ahead, with the program.
Okay. Well, hold that point, as we're about to run ahead with the second phase. You are watching Agriculture on the Move. Stay tuned, don't go away.
Bio means life. Biodiversity is the variety of life all around us. All plants, animals, and microbes, and the places where they live. We need to protect biodiversity so that we can continue to enjoy all the resources it provides. Fresh air, clean water, food, clothing, shelter, and recreation. Biosafety ensures that we protect biodiversity against any negative impacts of GMOs while using it safely for national development.
For more information on the Biosafety project and how you can be involved, call 451-8746 or 722-9252. Log on to lc.biosafetyclearinghouse.net or join the mailing list slubiosafety@govt.lc.
Welcome back to the program, Agriculture on the Move. If you're joining us, with me is Mr. Alwyn Dornelly, who is the Chief Forest Officer, and we're talking about desertification and land degradation here in St. Lucia. Okay, we spoke about the first phase, and based on your accomplishment of your first phase, St. Lucia was chosen to go into a second phase. But tell us a little more about your first phase. What did you all do? Where on island did you all carry out the execution of that program?
So during the first phase, we would have, as I said, we would have had to identify, our targets. So that was done using certain indicators. And you would have land cover being one of those indicators. I guess the depletion
of the forest.
Yes, in terms of land cover, as well as looking at carbon stocks. Now, when we talk about carbon stocks, we think of areas of forest that, in the life of the plants, that would utilize carbon dioxide, especially during transpiration of the cycles of the plant. They would use carbon dioxide and, turn it over into something, that's positive, release oxygen.
Okay.
So the oxygen that we breathe in, a lot of that.
Okay.
But also the plants would photosynthesize, which means they would use, sunlight and
for production.
Yeah. So they are like carbon sinks, So they would reduce the amount of carbon dioxide, that is available in the air, which is not, which can be toxic
to human life.
Yes. So when they talk about the carbon stocks above and below ground, it's actually it's all linked to the vegetation, so that you can find on the land. So there was one other, I don't remember right now, but yeah, there were about 3 indicators.
But apart from the human element of land degradation, there's also climate change that would affect.
Well, yes, climate change will affect the land. Climate change will affect the resources.
Right.
It will affect the biodiversity generally. Hurricanes, for example.
Yes.
And if you think of what happened in Dominica,
landslides and other
landslides.
Yes.
We had those very, strong hurricanes destroyed large sections, of the natural forest, So, and these are not events that we can prevent.
Yes.
But then, on the other hand, it's been suggested that some of our actions are causing conditions that are being created, so that when those
enables climate change,
come around, they're more intensive, or they're stronger, and they are causing more destruction.
But is it planting of or reforestation is part and parcel of the first phase that you all have, where you planted trees in areas almost not deserts, but forest depletion?
Well, that would be also, an aspect that we would bring into the whole program.
Okay.
But I dare say that, I mean, the forestry department has been about, reforestation, afforestation, for as long as
yes,
he's
many,
been
many
in
moons.
existence, and that activity remains a recurrent activity. It never stops, and hopefully that if it comes to a point where it is stopped,
Well, that's it.
well, my thinking is that everywhere would be under forest, but we cannot think
It's impossible.
of that happening, and then for that reforestation, to come to an end,
Where
at any time.
where is that balance between livelihoods when you look at agriculture, landless farmers, wanting to farm in forest areas? How would you handle this?
The most significant thing that you can do, or the approach that you can use, is to get people or the farmers, to understand the value and the importance of the trees, of the forest, of having that resource, in as much as you have to find a balance between subsistence, because we grew up on agriculture, and that depended on clearing of the forests, at some periods of time, in large amounts, to be able to go into production and to sustain your family, sustain your livelihoods. But we have had, and we have always, advocated for practices that can be done, that could be effective, that could create some level of protection, for the land, for the resource, as well as to be able to generate, that kind of livelihood support. So agroforestry, for example,
Right.
is one of those strategies or practices, that we have used, for a very long time. You have situations that even to create barriers. There are certain species, on your property that you could use. It could help protect your farming, crops from maybe strong winds. But you can also, when you plant those crops, they are trees, maybe fruit-bearing trees, that you can also harvest, crops, from them. We have experimented with even things like cashew nut, working with extension. We have the mobi. We have utilized even the latanier, and looking at these as
economic crops.
Yes, and not necessarily to replace what you have already, but is to add, an additional crop to what you may have. On some of the projects that we have, we're looking at sustainable, livelihoods, and looking at things like vanilla, even passion fruit crops that can survive on the
ecological zone
the
system.
shades, those, that kind of microclimate.
The second phase you spoke about now, tell us exactly what's been done.
So in the second phase of the LDN, we are going to upscale some of the meeting with stakeholders. So you'd see a number of consultations that we're having with various facets, of the public, and we are going to link that also with, there is a regional project, that some years ago, I think 2 or 3 years ago, we had an opening at Forestry. It's a project called the Soil Care.
Yes,
I think you
remember
covered.
that. I remember that.
Yes.
Yes.
And that project, it's a regional project that's been implemented by the Partnership Initiative for Sustainable Land Management, PISLM. Now, PISLM is it's like a body, a Caribbean body that is helping to implement UNCCD for CARICOM countries. So it was set up by agreements among CARICOM heads somewhere around 2000.
So how long is the second phase?
So that's what I'm coming to.
Okay.
The second phase is will run for about a year. Well, the consultancy period, but the link here with PISLM is there's a component that is dealing with soils, mapping our soils, updating of information on the soils. The last real recognized soils map, I think, that we had was from the 60s. So we're looking to update that under the soil care, but also we can identify further areas that might be that there might be a threat of degradation going into the land being degraded, and it is for us to be able to identify strategies or actions, things that we can do to avoid, those lands, actually going into degradation. So that requires us meeting with persons at various levels, and that's where the consultations come in first. So you see us meeting with, there could be farmers, or the landowners, and speaking to them and seeing what kind of what options maybe that we may come up with.
Well, comrade, I was hoping that we would come to the end of the program already. Okay.
Yes,
so I want to really thank you for being here, and I wish you success with your second phase, and of course the mutual benefit, of course, in the end, and of course, and livelihoods for the farmers out there. So thank you again.
Yes.
You've been watching Agriculture on the Move. I want to thank you for viewing the program, and remember, of course, those of you who are not receiving fertilizers, please check with your extension officers in your region, and there are more fertilizers to come. Another 40 bags of urea from Venezuela. I'm Philip Sidney saying goodbye, and see you again.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.